On the quiet night of June 12, 2025, the world was shaken by startling news from the Middle East. Israel had launched a massive military attack against Iran. This was not a small or limited action, it was a very large and serious operation. Israel's leaders called this major military event Operation Rising Lion. They described it as a preemptive strike, meaning they attacked first to prevent a future attack from Iran. The Israeli military confirmed that this was just the beginning of a campaign that could continue for many days. The primary goal, as stated by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, was to completely remove the threat they believed Iran posed to their nation's safety and existence. This bold move immediately put the entire region on high alert. The scale of the attack was truly immense and demonstrated significant military planning. Israel sent approximately 200 of its most advanced fighter jets, including powerful warplanes made in the United States, deep into Iranian territory. This large fleet of aircraft was tasked with a very specific and dangerous mission. Their targets were not random. The jets were aimed at the very heart of Iran's military and scientific power. This included hitting Iran's nuclear program facilities, destroying its ballistic missile sites, and targeting the senior commanders of its armed forces. The Israeli government also called up tens of thousands of reserve soldiers, signaling to its people and the world that the country needed to prepare for a long and difficult conflict that might last for an extended period. The timing of this dramatic attack was very important and seemed carefully chosen. The strikes began just one day after a 60-day deadline, set by US President Donald Trump for Iran to negotiate a new nuclear deal, had expired. Additionally, the operation occurred right before a new round of nuclear talks between the United States and Iran was scheduled to start in Oman on June 15. This timing suggests that Israel may have lost all faith in diplomatic solutions. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar also connected the operation to past events, stating that the war with Iran truly began with the Hamas-led attacks on October 7, 2023, which Israel has long blamed on Iranian support and direction. In Israel, the government quickly moved the country to a state of emergency. Air raid sirens blared across different parts of the nation as citizens were urged to stay close to bomb shelters. The National Health Ministry ordered all hospitals to move their critical operations into protected underground areas to prepare for potential retaliation. Major public events, including the famous Tel Aviv Pride Parade, were canceled immediately to ensure public safety. Leaders from Israel's far-right political parties praised the government's decisive action, calling the strikes a necessary step to protect the country. The nation held its breath, waiting to see how Iran would respond to this unprecedented and aggressive military operation against its sovereign territory. The Israeli airstrikes hit Iran with devastating precision, causing significant damage and chaos. One of the main targets was the Natanz nuclear enrichment facility, a site central to Iran's nuclear ambitions. Images from the ground showed large flames and thick smoke rising from the facility, indicating a major hit. While Iran's Atomic Energy Agency tried to downplay the impact by saying the damage was only on the surface, the attack was a clear blow to its program. Other strikes hit several cities including the capital, Tehran. Explosions were reported in the Lavizan and Farazad districts, areas known to house military command centers and residences of high-ranking officials. The attacks also reached Kermanshah, Hamadan, and Tabriz, where civilian casualties were tragically reported. The human cost of Operation Rising Lion was incredibly high, especially within Iran's top military and scientific leadership. Israel's intelligence appeared to be very accurate as the strikes successfully killed several of the most powerful figures in the country. Among the confirmed dead were Media Group, portrait photo of Major General Mohammad Bagheri, Iranian military leader in uniform at stock at distribute_equally. Major General Mohammad Bagheri, the chief of the entire Iranian Armed Forces General Staff. Major General Hossein Salami, the powerful commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. Gholam Ali Rasid, a top commander, and even Faridun Abbasi, a leading nuclear scientist. The news from Iran was grim, as state media also reported that at least 6 other nuclear scientists had been killed in the attacks, a huge loss for their scientific community. Iran's leadership was thrown into turmoil, but it moved quickly to project an image of strength and control. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei immediately appointed replacements for the assassinated commanders, trying to show that the chain of command was unbroken. However, the shock among the Iranian people was undeniable. In Tehran and other cities, citizens woke up to the sound of explosions and the sight of smoke-filled skies. The Iranian president addressed the nation, asking people to remain calm and trust the country's leadership during this difficult time. But the loss of so many respected and feared leaders in a single night was a severe blow to the government's prestige and its ability to protect the nation from its greatest enemy. In response to the devastating attack, Iran's leaders promised a powerful and swift answer. The supreme leader vowed harsh punishment for what he called a criminal act of aggression. Iran's foreign minister declared that Israel would deeply regret its reckless decision. The first signs of this retaliation came quickly. Iran launched over 100 drones toward Israel, aiming to strike back. While Israel's advanced air defense systems like the Iron Dome successfully intercepted most of these drones before they could cause major damage, the message was clear. Iran was not going to stand by silently. It also summoned the Swiss ambassador, who represents U.S. interests in Iran, to formally protest what it claimed was American involvement in the attack. The news of Israel's attack sent shockwaves through the international community, with world leaders reacting with a mixture of support, condemnation, and urgent calls for calm. The United States, Israel's closest ally, was in a complicated position. The Trump administration publicly supported Israel's right to defend itself but insisted that the U.S. was not directly involved in the military operation. President Trump called the Israeli strikes very successful and used the moment to pressure Iran, urging its leaders to negotiate a new deal before there is nothing left. However, behind the scenes, American officials were reportedly worried, as they now faced a major crisis in the Middle East that could easily escalate and draw in the roughly 40,000 U.S. troops stationed across the region. Other global powers reacted with deep concern, fearing a wider war. European nations like the United Kingdom, France, and Germany immediately called for a diplomatic solution and urged both sides to show restraint. They worried that the conflict could spiral out of control, creating a massive humanitarian and security crisis. China, a country with strong economic ties to Iran, voiced its opposition to the strikes, calling them an infringement on Iran's sovereignty. In the Middle East, Iran's Arab neighbors, including those who have complex relationships with both Iran and Israel, condemned the attacks. They expressed serious concerns that the fighting could spread beyond the two countries, destabilizing the entire region and threatening their own security. The conflict had an immediate and dramatic impact on the global economy, especially on the price of oil. Fears that the fighting could disrupt the flow of oil from the Middle East, particularly through the critical Strait of Hormuz, caused panic in the markets. The price of Brent crude oil jumped by nearly 6%, while U.S. oil prices spiked by more than 8%. This was one of the largest single-day increases in years, threatening to make gasoline more expensive for people all over the world. The economic uncertainty also affected international travel. Many major global airlines quickly suspended all flights to Iran and other parts of the Middle East, and several countries, including Iran, Iraq, Jordan, and Israel, temporarily closed their airspace to all civilian aircraft. In response to the escalating crisis, diplomatic channels were buzzing with activity. Iran formally requested an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council to condemn Israel's actions and to accuse the United States of being complicit in the attack. At the UN, Israel's ambassador defended the operation, framing it as a necessary act of self-defense against an Iranian regime that constantly threatens to destroy his country. Jordan found itself in a difficult position, caught in the middle of the conflict. It was forced to intercept some of the Iranian drones and missiles that flew over its territory on their way to Israel, stating firmly that it would not allow its country to become a battlefield for others. With Israel's operation ongoing and Iran vowing revenge, the future of the Middle East hangs in a delicate and dangerous balance. The immediate future of diplomacy looks very bleak. The planned sixth round of nuclear negotiations between the U.S. and Iran, once a source of hope for a peaceful resolution, is now almost certainly canceled. It is difficult to imagine diplomats sitting down at a negotiating table while bombs are falling and drones are in the air. This breakdown of talks pushes the world further away from a potential nuclear deal, which was meant to limit Iran's nuclear capabilities. The possibility of a wider conflict, a devastating war that could involve many other countries, has now become frighteningly real. The world is now watching to see what Iran's next move will be. Experts believe that after suffering such a public and humiliating blow, Iran will have to retaliate in a massive way to save face and restore its authority in the region. This retaliation could take many forms. Iran might launch more sophisticated ballistic missiles at Israel, which could overwhelm its defense systems. It could also use its proxy forces across the Middle East, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon or militias in Syria and Iraq, to open new fronts against Israel and its allies. Such a multi-front war would be catastrophic, leading to immense loss of life and destruction across several countries, and would almost certainly draw the United States and other nations directly into the fighting. For the people living in Israel and Iran, the future is filled with fear and uncertainty. In Israel, citizens must now live with the constant threat of retaliatory strikes, wondering if every siren will be followed by an explosion. Daily life has been disrupted, and a sense of emergency hangs over the nation. In Iran, the people are not only dealing with the shock and grief from the initial attacks, but also with the fear of what comes next. They face the prospect of more Israeli strikes and a long, drawn-out war that could bring even more suffering and isolation to their country. The leaders of both nations are under immense pressure, and any miscalculation could lead to a disastrous escalation. Ultimately, the world holds its breath because a full-scale war between Israel and Iran would have consequences that reach every corner of the globe. It would threaten global energy supplies, disrupt international trade, and could trigger a new refugee crisis. It would also have a profound impact on the global balance of power, forcing countries to choose sides in a conflict with no easy answers. This is why Operation Rising Lion is more than just a regional conflict. It is a global crisis. The decisions made in Jerusalem, Tehran, and Washington in the coming days and weeks will determine whether the region steps back from the brink or plunges into a dark and unpredictable new chapter of history.